Joining me right now to assess this fluid situation is the ranking member of House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul, and the only Green Beret in Congress, Florida Congressman Michael Waltz, a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here. We appreciate your time. Michael Waltz, we want to get your take on this insurgency, but first, Congressman Michael McCaul, assess where we are now that Vladimir Putin has put his Russian nuclear forces on alert.
This is truly a nightmare scenario that would spark a global third world war. He threatened the West with consequences graver than we have ever seen in history of mankind. That can only mean one thing: nuclear weapons. And now to hear him put the nuclear forces on high alert, I'm really starting to question the competency, mental fitness. He seems to be delusional, very isolated, and this is really terrifying, not just for Ukraine, but the entire world. And let me just say lastly, I'm very proud of Zelensky and the Ukrainians standing up, because the military assessment, as I understand it, is the resistance has been very successful, beating back the Russians, who thought they would have this over in a matter of days, and that's what we were briefed on as well. Right. And they're fighting back, and we need to arm them.
That's exactly right. And Congressman Michael Waltz, your thoughts on that? When we spoke over the weekend, you called him a modern-day Churchill. Assess Zelensky, and also you are seeing a real specialty. You've always had this specialty in insurgencies. So I want to get your take on delivering this extra armament that now many countries have had second thoughts about, Germany in particular. Will they be able to deliver what's needed in time?
Yeah, better late than never from Germany, right? But, Maria, there's three things you need for a successful insurgency. You need the will to fight, you need the resources, and then you need a sanctuary to logistically provide those resources. Zelensky and the Ukrainians are clearly showing the will to fight. I do believe he's turning out to be a modern-day Winston Churchill. We need to help him stay alive. Biden doesn't need to be offering to evacuate him. We need to be giving him secure communications and the ability to continue to lead. Yesterday, Biden finally, belatedly, approved $350 million in military aid. That's not cash. That will actually be ammunition, body armor, secure communications, and what they really need are anti-aircraft missiles, Stingers. We were flying in that previous aid that Biden had approved. Now, with the airspace shut down by the Russian Air Force, we'll have to move it over land, and that leads to the sanctuary. Poland and Romania will have to step up to provide those arms over their border. And here's where NATO could get drawn in. If Russia decides to try to stop that aid from coming into the Ukrainian resistance at the Polish border, that could get very dicey. One other thing to watch, Maria, is Turkey. Zelensky has asked Turkey to close down the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus Strait to not allow Russian ships into the Black Sea. I think we need to be leaning hard on Turkey to do that. And if they do that, it could choke off Russia's fleet and truly aid the Ukrainian resistance.
Really important points from you both. I know that at this moment it appears that Zelensky and Ukraine might be winning in terms of holding down their land. However, we know that Russia has a lot more firepower, and it's only using half of the troops so far at the border. So I want to get your take on what next can happen. I also, Congressman, want to get your take on why the Biden administration, in the fog of war, just gave the CCP an incredible concession, shutting down the investigation into China's intellectual property theft and surveillance. That's next. We will connect the dots with these two congressmen when we come right back.
To protect and defend every ally and every inch of NATO territory.
Welcome back. That was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Friday announcing the alliance, which consists of 30 member countries, will provide more aid and weapons to Ukraine, including air defense systems. We are back with Congressman Michael Waltz and Michael McCaul. Michael McCaul, what do you make of the U.S. and its allies shutting out certain Russian banks from the SWIFT network? How important is that, and what should be done now?
Well, I've said all along that we should have been doing this pre-invasion, not post. and the lethal aid pre-invasion outpost. But here we are. And the fact is, I'm glad they're doing the SWIFT sanctions and sanctioning Putin himself. But the big exemption that's carved out, Maria, is energy. This is Putin's biggest source of income, revenue coming into Russia, 40%. Europe's 40% tied to it. This is why, for the life of me, I don't know why the president waived Nord Stream 2 sanctions that I worked so hard to put on that pipeline. But the fact of the matter is, if you carve out energy, that's his lifeblood, Putin's lifeblood. And it also, the idea that we're importing Russian energy in the United States after our president shut down Keystone, made us not energy independent anymore, but rather now dependent on Russia, and then putting Putin's pipeline into Europe, making Europe dependent on Russian energy is such a huge foreign policy and national security failure that we find ourselves now. I would say unleash the arsenal of sanctions right now. Now's the time. Don't wait any longer.
Well, I mean, Michael Waltz, it's so obvious for anybody to see how bad policy has resulted in terrible, bad outcomes. Your thoughts on why energy is exempted and why, by the way, has the U.S. increased its imports of oil from Russia?
Yeah. Well, it's because Europe is hooked on, is absolutely addicted and hooked on Russian oil and gas. And the irony of it all, Biden's Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, admitted to me in a hearing it's some of the dirtiest form of gas in the world. So the environmental argument doesn't even hold up. But since the United States has moved away from Venezuelan oil, rightly, and since Biden then shut down U.S. domestic oil, we've become more dependent, with 7% of our imports now coming from Russia. We've actually doubled the amount of Russian oil and gas that we've imported in the last year. It's just unbelievable. It's unacceptable, and it's got to stop. And I hope Biden announces a reversal at the State of the Union, but I'm not optimistic.
And Maria, why is
Michael
Putin
Waltz,
in
yeah, go ahead.
Why is he in Ukraine to begin with, right? Well, diminish, weaken NATO, legacy, regain the glory of the empire, but it's to control the Black Sea. He wants the ports, Odessa, Mariupol. He wants to control the Black Sea. That is energy, and that's what this whole thing is about.
That's a great point. It absolutely is right, Congressman. And Michael Waltz, I want to switch gears and ask you about why the U.S., in the fog of war, has given the Chinese Communist Party an incredible concession here. The Department of Justice has ended the Trump-era China initiative following what they're calling concerns over bias. We have had a string of indictments of, academics, embassy staff, people who were getting paid by the CCP and sending intellectual property of America, even intellectual property that is used in our military, to the CCP. And now the DOJ shuts this investigation down. Can you explain this?
Yep. It's inexplainable. But look, the Chinese Communist Party is stealing their way to the top militarily. The hypersonic missile that they launched, the new stealth fighters, their new ballistic missile submarines are being built based on American advanced research, nanotechnology, supercomputing, advanced materials, and they're stealing it from our universities and our research institutes. So, for example, I'm on a committee, the Science Committee, that has oversight of the National Science Foundation, passes billions onto our universities and research grants. Do you know how large their security office is, Maria? It's one woman. And they've received 1,000% increase in referrals from the FBI on research theft, stealing this stuff and sending it right over to Beijing. And you have American professors that make all kinds of money on research grants from the Defense Department and NASA, then goes over and moonlights as a second job over in Chinese universities, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. The Trump DOJ started an aggressive campaign called the China Initiative to investigate these professors and these students and this theft. And now the Biden DOJ is shutting it down. And it's inexplicable.
Michael McCall, you were the head of the China task force. You knew what was going on. Are you doing anything about the fact that the DOJ is going to shut this investigation down? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's not a priority for them, and they cite kind of this woke politics, political correctness argument for shutting it down. You know, I live in Texas. We shut down the Houston consulate for a reason. They were stealing intellectual property from universities, from scientists, from NASA, and that's what it was all geared towards. I was a federal prosecutor. I met with the Attorney General on this very issue. We had a lot of indictments coming down in the previous administration, and now we're seeing it drying up. Why is that? I have to ask that broader question. You know, when you saw President Xi and Putin at the Beijing Olympics in this unholy alliance, this is a fear, and we talked about Iran as well. But this, to ignore the threat from within, the enemy within the United States, which is real, and the espionage is real, and Mike's right, that hypersonic was built on the backbone of American technology. That's got to stop.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Michael McCall, Michael Waltz will be watching your efforts on this.